I was probably around 20 when I knew that I had a major problem. I think I had gotten to a point in my life where I wasn't sure that God really existed. I just said, God, if you're real, reveal yourself to me, because I'm at a point where I'm just unsure anymore.
Hi, I'm Kelly Parkinson, and welcome to the podcast, The Ordinary Brave. Today, we're going to hear a testimony of Jesus' transforming power and just the courage it takes to walk out that redemption day to day. My guest has struggled with years of addiction and destructive choices, yet God pursued him in that and also transformed his life at a teen challenge program. And we're going to hear more about his story today. Let's welcome Chris Randolph. Chris, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, tell me a little bit before we get into your story, just like your background, where'd you grow up? You can even talk a little bit about your family today.
Yeah. I was born and raised here in Cookeville, Tennessee. My family also from here. My parents divorced when I was 7. I vividly remember, sitting on the steps and watching my dad leave, and I think that really sent me into an identity crisis early on in life. I didn't know what I didn't know what I should be or how I should feel. And I think it really took a toll on me, in my adolescent years, trying to become what I thought a man was, what I thought, my parents didn't go to church. Seldomly they would. My mom would go to church. But I really didn't get, planted in a church until, probably my middle school years. I started going to church with a friend of mine, Justin Davis, and his family at Washington Avenue. And, that's where I met God for the first time. And so, fast forward through the years of my destructive choices and whatnot. Now I'm, a father of 3 beautiful children, and my wife, Andrea, and, God has brought me from a place I never thought he could bring me from. And, I am a testimony of his grace, of his mercy, and of his power.
Amen.
And
So, at what age were you when really, I guess, drugs entered into your life? And I know you said that your parents' divorce probably played into that, and maybe like the lack of the presence of your father being there played into some of those decisions. But I guess maybe like what opened the door to drugs for you? What age were you?
sophomore year of high school, I think that's the, um, I was in FCA my freshman year of high school, and I played sports, and just peer pressure and looking for belonging, and found myself in situations with people I shouldn't have been hanging around with. And uh, up until that point, I had a relationship with Christ, but I don't think it was really rooted in the knowledge of His Word and what it means to have a relationship with God. And so, when the storms came, I folded under the pressure, and I looked for belonging, and I looked for satisfaction, and I looked for filling the holes in my life with drugs and alcohol through partying and things like that.
So, how did that affect maybe other relationships in your life? Um, you had earlier, years prior, you had met God for the first time. So, maybe how was that spiritual relationship being affected? Maybe even like family dynamics, friends. I don't know.
Yeah, it it slowly numbed me to really any kind of relationships. My lack of empathy for, um, you know, I guess the way that my adolescent relationships had gone with, my mother and father splitting up, and not really having a great relationship um, with cousins, or my sister was 13 years older than me, so we really had not much of a relationship either. My brother was 9 years older than me and had Down syndrome, and so we had a relationship, but it wasn't a. I think I was just broken. I didn't know how to have a relationship
Mm-hmm.
really, and
Mm-hmm.
so um, I think the drugs and alcohol and those things just I think it numbed me to a point where I was incapable of having a relationship,
Mm-hmm.
a lasting, real relationship with anybody.
Mm-hmm. So tell me how Andrea fits into all of this, and maybe like the time frame. So this all kind of started in high school,
Yeah,
and then did you meet Andrea in high school, or?
I met Andrea in fifth grade,
Oh.
roughly fourth,
Mm-hmm.
fifth grade.
Mm-hmm.
She played on the girls' basketball team for school, and I played on the boys' basketball team for school, and we were just friends for a long, long time.
Mm-hmm.
And um, I remember in high school having a crush on her my freshman year, and asking her to date me, and she stuck me in the friend zone, and then our sophomore year we ended up starting to date, and dated for the majority of high school. So
So she was dating you really as you were going down this
yes,
path.
yes,
Okay.
we both were,
Okay.
to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
We both were in kind of the party scene,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, both struggling with um, our identity,
Sure.
especially our identity in Christ.
Sure.
So,
So I guess at what point did you hit in your life, or how old were you, or where were you when you realized something has to change?
so I would say probably I was probably around 20 when I knew that I had a major problem, and that I wanted change,
Mm-hmm.
um, and didn't know how to go about changing that. And my mom's suggestion for change was to join the military, and so that's what I did. I went into the Air Force, and hoping that some discipline and things that I lacked in my earlier life from not having a father figure to teach me those things, that the military would kind of fill in for that and teach me
Mm-hmm.
how to be a man, and hoping that would help me get out of it, but it didn't. It made things. Yes, it gave me discipline, but I switched one habit for another. Drinking in the military is just a way of life. It is part of the culture, and so you know, I just traded one thing for another,
Mm-hmm.
and um, so I struggled throughout my 20s trying to figure out how I was going to get out of the mess that I was in, and it wasn't until Lehman was born, my first son, when I knew that something had to change.
And so, what led you to Teen Challenge? How did you end up in that program?
So before I went to Teen Challenge, I had went to another program, a secular program, and I spent 90 days there. And at that point in time, was the first time I had been sober in about uh, 8 to 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
and it really felt good. But see, there was no foundation, and it just wasn't going to last.
Because
Um,
it didn't have a spiritual component.
Correct. Yeah. There was no changing of habits. There was really no game plan, future game plan for it. It was just well, you've sobered up and your 90 days are up, and here you go back out into the world. And I fell on my face again. And it wasn't until I had a friend that had graduated from Teen Challenge that I grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
And he had gotten connected through Andrea to me, and was talking to her about the program. And then I was connected to him over the phone. We talked about it, and I talked to the campus pastor there, Pastor John McKinnon, and um, it was apparent that that was the route to go. And so, at that point in my life, I think I had gone, I think I had strayed so far from God that, I always had given the Hail Mary prayers, as they say,
Sure.
The Lord, if you just get me out of this,
I'll do this for you, or I'll
yeah,
live my life for you.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'd wake up the next morning and I was still in the same mess. And I think I had gotten a, I think I had gotten to a point in my life where um, I wasn't sure that God really existed. And I wanted to believe that he did, but I think circumstances in my life and the way things had gone, I think maybe I had some, maybe some resentment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, I knew that that was the decision. If anything was going to change me, then this was kind of a last ditch effort for that.
Yeah.
So,
So I know there's teen challenges, I think, all over the nation and
yeah,
maybe even abroad.
yeah.
Where did you go? Which location?
I went to Southwest Florida Teen Challenge in Fort Myers,
Okay.
and that's kind of, being here in Cookeville. Typically, they send people from around this area. They send them to Michigan,
Mm-hmm.
to the Teen Challenge up there. In my particular circumstance, the friend that I had spoken with had graduated from Southwest Florida Teen Challenge, and the campus pastor I talked to was the head campus pastor there, and so that's where I ended up going.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a year-long program, and it's an amazing program. I mean, I can't say enough good things about the people that serve God um, through that ministry, and the common misconception that it's called Teen Challenge, but there are people there that are 50s, 60s, people of all walks of life that come to meet God for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so it's an amazing
So
ministry.
tell me some things like specifically that happened there and how being there totally changed your life.
So when I got there, and my wife usually posts this picture every year.
I've seen it.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I was, um, I was like 154 pounds,
Mm-hmm.
and I really looked rough the day I got there. And I was so broken spiritually and emotionally, and but there was like a feeling of hope when I got to the doors
Mm-hmm.
there. I couldn't help but smile, even though everything in my life was broken.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't explain that other than, the Spirit of God is so heavy there
Yeah.
that it's unlike any other place that I've really ever been before. And and so, the first day there was kind of acclimation to the strenuous schedule that they go through,
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of really just trying to make it to the next day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so the second day there is talking to counselors and pastors, and just kind of going through kind of what led you there, what's the plan for the next couple of weeks, getting you know into the flow of things. And I had a prayer with a campus pastor there that I just said, God, if you're real, reveal yourself to me, because I'm at a point where I'm just unsure anymore. And, over the next couple of weeks, he really came to life in my life. And, I don't know how else to explain really the transformation that happened over that year that I was there.
Well, for me, I've known you since all of that.
Yeah.
And it kind of, I know other people have similar testimonies, and I can't even imagine your life before, because I see you as this incredible dad and incredible husband and servant in your church and servant in your community. And so for me, the transformation is real, because I can't even picture that side of you, just because I know your heart and the way you live now. And it's so true that transformation took place. And I've heard so much wonderful things from other families too that have had children or spouses go through Teen Challenge. And you're just always hearing it. I know it's not always a success story, but I feel like you hear a lot of wonderful, positive things coming out of that ministry.
Yeah.
So, what tools, habits, or spiritual disciplines have helped you stay strong since you have come home from Teen Challenge, which was, what, 10, 11 years ago?
Pretty close, yeah. It was 2016, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so almost 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So what are some disciplines maybe that you've developed, whether it's spiritually or other things that you do to help keep you on this road of recovery?
So that's the great thing about, and I'll go back to Teen Challenge, the structure of that program. It is very strenuous in the fact that you're every day. So it's, and everybody knows, like, just as a base, everybody says, I want to get back in shape. And it's like, they start working out and they get 3 or 4 days into it and then it kind of falls off, And so the hardest thing to do is to create a habit. And the easiest thing to do is to break a habit. And so at Teen Challenge, they build habits. And so every morning you're up at 5:30 in the morning, your chores are done. The next thing you do is you go to your quiet time and you spend time with God. And so every morning I was doing that, and I was creating a habit of setting aside time in my day to read the Word, to pray to God, and just to sit in silence and allow Him to speak into my life. And so, after quiet time, there was, breakfast and then chapel or class. They would, everybody in the program was on a different path. And so, you might be in the book of Genesis, or you might be in the Gospels, or you might be in the prophets, or you might be in Acts, or, and so, going through those classes as well, and just really, I think what I had early when I was at church at Washington Avenue was kind of superficial. I really didn't have any depth of knowledge of the Bible and kind of, whereas with Teen Challenge, I got in deep into the Bible and the connections from the Old Testament to the New Testament and what it actually meant, for all of the things that Christ accomplished, in his life and up to the cross. And so, all of the structures that Teen Challenge gave me, I continued on in my life. I make time every day to spend with God. I talk to my kids about formal prayer and informal prayer. Like, formal prayer is you bow your heads and you close your eyes and you know you're talking to God. You're glorifying Him. Our mission partner over in Southeast Asia, he talks about the acts of prayer, right? To adorn God, to confess, um, to thank God, and then to supplicate, right? And so I talk to my kids about that and how important that structure of prayer is, right? But then there's the informal prayer where it's like on my day to day, if I'm driving down the road or whatever uh, kind of atmosphere that I'm in, I'm constantly talking to God. I'm asking Him questions. I'm listening, um, and then I'm connected to a D group through our church, and I meet with those guys every Tuesday morning, and it does so much for me to do life with other men of faith, and I think that's one of the most important things is to be connected with like-minded people, to be able to lean on other Christians, and um, I also I have a small group that me and Chris um, that we have on Wednesday nights, and that was a really hard thing for me to let go of was the Wednesday night service because I really liked that and sitting in there with your husband and like that was my thing and so but it's been such a blessing to be in that small group and to meet more people within our church that I now have real relationships
Mm-hmm.
with, and that's super important as well. Um, and I'm constantly working on still today working on what does a relationship look like, with my kids, with my wife, with the people I work with the people at church. I'm probably the world's worst at answering someone's text messages, and my wife can tell you that, and my small group, the people in my small group can tell you that. I'm not much of a texter, but in person, my wife will also tell you that I talk a lot at church. But um, yeah, so those things, staying connected to the church has probably been one of the most important things that I've done since I've been back.
Sure. And I just think it's beautiful. I get to see you at church, but not only that, our boys are best buddies.
Yeah.
And so I get to see you live out your family life. And I just think God is so good to think you didn't really have that role model, as a dad. And you are a great father, Chris. I hope you know that. I love to watch you love your children. And God is just so good. Just he can take those broken stories and just redeem them. And I'm
Yeah.
so thankful that I get to a front row seat to watch that in your family. But I think God is using you in other ways too, as I know that you have been working in a jail ministry,
Yeah.
which I think is also really awesome because you're being able to use, you can take in your background, your life experience. I feel like you know what these people are feeling in there. Um, I think addiction and drugs can take away your self worth. And, as you said, you struggle with your identity. And I feel like there's a lot of people that are in jail that probably drugs is a big component, a part of that. And just tell us about what you're doing in jails and maybe how God has used your experience to minister to those. And if there's maybe like a standout story or a testimony that you can share from that, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. So I got asked about a year and a half ago um, to kind of be for lack of a better word, an ambassador from our church to help with God's jail ministry at the Putnam County Jail. And it's been such a blessing. And I knew from the day that I left the doors of Teen Challenge that I wanted to do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when I got back from Teen Challenge, I pursued that pretty heavily, um, several different places, and God kind of closed the door on that. and I understand why now, right? But at the time, I was so sold on, like, these are the people, these are my people, right? These are the
Mm-hmm.
people that my testimony connects to. And not only that, this is my hometown. So most of these people, a lot of these people, they know me, and they
Mm-hmm.
know where I was and where
Mm-hmm.
I am today. And that is powerful in and of itself. But God closed the door at that time and said, your ministry right now is to your children. And so, you know, I would say for 5, 6, 7 years, that's what I concentrated on, was my kids and bringing them up in the Lord. And so when this door opened, I was really excited about
Mm-hmm.
it. And I've had some great conversations with guys in there, and they're, you know, if people could just see the guys in there for what they really are, which are just human beings that have
Mm-hmm.
made mistakes, as we all do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, I really enjoy sharing my testimony to those guys in there, and it's almost a shocker to most of them, the path that I came from and
Mm-hmm.
where I'm sitting across the table from them. And that's the power and testimony that only Christ, can
Mm-hmm.
give through transformation. And, you know, I have not yet I invite everyone when they get out, um, to come to Stephen Street, come to my church and get connected. And I always talk to the guys in there, about the same kind of set of things. The scripture may be different from, week to week, but, we talk about the same core things. Know your enemy, because if you don't know your enemy, then you can't combat him. Have a plan when you leave here. Your plan needs to be connected to a church,
Mm-hmm.
first and foremost, because if you're not connected to a church, then you're by yourself. And if you're by yourself combating against the devil, you're going to lose. And that's just the small and the short of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, um, I have not yet seen the fruit of that yet. And I think it's kind of like, I had a conversation with the people, in my small group a couple weeks ago after I had gotten back from Southeast Asia, and they had asked the same thing. Well, how many people got saved? Well, nobody. And I didn't see any fruit. But just because I didn't see the fruit doesn't mean that God isn't producing the fruit
Right.
in what we did there, as just being obedient.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I
And
don't.
sometimes the fruit is us.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
he's growing us
yeah,
and pruning us.
yes,
And so sometimes that fruit is happening to us.
yes, yes. He does just as much for me when I go in and talk to those guys in the jail as he does for them. And, um, you know, I know that there's fruit being produced in that, in the long term. And I just have to trust that the path that I'm on and the things that I'm doing in serving Christ, um, will eventually produce fruit. And, and I may never see that, and I have to be okay with that, because it's not about me.
Right.
So,
So, how could people in this community that might be listening, and even if they don't live here, how could they maybe support some of this work at the jail ministry or Teen Challenge? What are the best ways for people to support those types of ministries?
well, prayer first and foremost. I mean, prayer is really powerful. And, um, you know, I think locally here, I see some ministries that are coming up. Um, um, I think we need a men's ministry here in Putnam County, a Teen Challenge. But, the biggest support would be prayer, or if you'd like to volunteer yourself. I mean, you know, you don't have to have been to jail before or been an addict to love on these people.
Mm.
You know, you just don't. Um, you love on them like Christ loved on you. It doesn't
Right.
matter what your situation or your story or your path was. I think when it boils down to it, it's all the same. We once lived in sin as they live in sin, and all sin is the same. It may look
Mm-hmm.
different, but it's all the same. And so, I would encourage anybody that has a Sunday afternoon that wants to serve God to come and get involved. I think it would do wonders for their walk with Christ just as much as it would for those men and women that are
Mm-hmm.
sitting in there lost right now,
Mm-hmm.
and looking for answers. So,
Well, thank you so much for meeting with me today and just sharing a part of your story. And I think it's one that can impact others. And, we know there's people out there that are struggling with addiction themselves, or they have family members that are. And my hope is that this story is just one of encouragement to them, and will point them to the Lord and closer to Him. So thank you for being here. Well, thank you for joining us today for the Ordinary Brave podcast. And again, if you are enjoying what you're hearing, if it's encouraging to you, please like and share our podcast with others. Remember, bravery and courage isn't always loud and dramatic and proud, and sometimes it's just that day to day, those habits that Chris was talking about, just living that courage day to day, the transformation that takes place. And a word that he used that I like is just also obedience. Sometimes it just takes courage to be obedient to what the Lord's asking you to do. So I pray you have a great day today.